it's working again for the moment, so let's make hay while the sun shines. All right, so these are the people who can attack you. You know, you may have politically motivated actors or other people, and then of course there's where they are. They might be far away on the internet, they might be physically in your building, or even within a secure area of your building. So this is an issue about who to protect yourself against. And all right. So anyway, you got a lot of policies, the acceptable use policy from all your users, what they're allowed to do with the laptop and on the network and so on. Your security policies, remote access and internet usage policies. These are good things to have. And then if you have outsourced IT, as I mentioned, then of course you might have a lot of problems. They might delay work. You might have to pay additional costs to get them to do things involved with an incident, like give you logs and analyze something. One thing you often do is there's something wrong and you call them and they say, well, it must be your problem, it must be somebody else's problem, and you spend a lot of time arguing about who has the problem. They may not have the ability to do what you want, like get at log files. So you really ought to have service level agreements which specify what will happen in the case of a security incident. And you can have things in there like we are even allowed to see your policy, we are even allowed to audit your systems to see if your policies are obeyed and things like that. But if you don't put that in the original agreement with them, then you won't have that right. And so, like I mentioned, large multinational organizations might have a lot of issues, like the privacy laws might limit what you can do. What's a red tape delay? Red tape delay just means you're waiting for bureaucracy. Like, you know, Ron DeSantis waiting 600 days for the federal government to let him buy drugs from Canada. You ask your outsourced IT to do something, like isolate a server or give you a log file, and they just make you wait for a long time for that to happen because it's not a priority to them. It's what they call red tape. All right, and so you got time zones and different people speaking different languages and all that jazz. And if you do have something large, like you want a whole hard disk image, but it's in another country, then that's very difficult to efficiently transfer back to some central base for analysis. So this is another issue if you have large-scale infrastructure. And you want to educate your users. Generally, you want your users to know the main way they're targeted. The number one way everybody always gets in is phishing. They send you emails, there's a link or an attachment, somebody opens it, and educating your users is considered a good idea. My consulting jobs, they hire people that send you fake phishing emails every week or so. You get a fake one. And so that's one thing a lot of people do. Other people say that's a bad idea. But it's a fairly common thing people do to try to make sure that your staff is aware that they're going to get funny-looking emails. And people should know what to do when there is an incident. They should know who to talk to and what steps they should take. You usually don't want them trying to figure it out themselves. You want them passing it on to your incident response team. And your users might install unsafe servers. They might put games on their laptop. They might put servers on, like FTP servers on the server to share things, sort of like they even put unauthorized wireless access points sometimes in a network, the sort of thing. They might install something which does not obey your security policy, and that's an issue. And if you educate them on the risks, then hopefully you can help discourage them from doing that stuff. People just get mad when they fall for the phishing emails. That's true, they do. Yeah, I've heard people say these fake phishing emails aren't as beneficial as people believe they are, but I've got them. In fact, I was pretty excited when the first one happened, but anyway. All right, so, and then I actually clicked on one. So, you know, that didn't punish me, though. I heard if you click on enough of them, they make you go to, like, remedial training. That didn't happen to me yet, but it could happen. Anyway, so let's look at a Kahoot. This is 152, 3A. There we go. I don't think Trump's going to prison. The best argument I've heard, I think if this gets worse, he'll just get pardoned, which is what you have to do. You can't throw Trump in prison, I think. Anyway, we'll see. Can't throw the King of England in prison either. I mean, you're going to put Secret Service agents in prison to protect him? I just don't think that's possible. There you go. I think he'll either wriggle out of it or he'll end up getting a pardon. But I have no special knowledge, of course. That's just what I'm guessing. Anyway. All right, maybe that's it. Let me see how many potential customers there are. 22 in chat, in the Twitch. All right, well, maybe only 10 are playing. That's all right. Seems to be about half the students these days. All right. All right, so a system administrator feels abused. So what is this situation? And they often do. That's an exposure. Unhappy workers are liable to, do bad things or make mistakes, things like that, or fall for things. So that's an exposure. This is a policy. It's certainly not a policy. A policy is just a rule at your company, like you cannot play games at work, something like that. All right, so what item would increase the responsiveness when you're outsourcing things? All right, yeah, that's the service level agreement. I see a comment in chat. I was thinking admin enforces abuse policy, hence abuse contact email and domain registration. Well, there is an abuse contact email on domain registration. I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, I'm not sure how that relates to the previous question. But anyway, all right, service level agreement is pretty clear here. That's what would help you when you're dealing with your outsourced resources. All right, so what do you reduce by educating users? And that's it. Users are hopefully less likely to install unauthorized software. All right. And what would make examining log files difficult or impossible? Outsourced IT is the main one. I can see the logs on my server, but I'm not authorized to. I found out how to hack into my own cloud server to see the logs, but they don't officially let me see them. So that's a problem. A lot of your contracts do not include seeing the logs. Anyway. All right. Of course, have to tell them who they are if they want their parts. But, it's you. Okay, good. All right. So let's carry on here. 6:30, we're okay. Good. All right. So your IR team also needs to get ready. So their mission, of course, is to respond to the incidents in an organized way and therefore conduct an investigation, quickly decide whether you have a real intrusion or not. Then assess the scope is the first thing. How big is the incident and how serious is it? Then you contain it so it stops getting bigger, like putting limits around the fire. And then you collect the evidence and analyze the situation and make sure you're protecting privacy rights as required and dealing correctly with law enforcement and your legal requirements and keeping confidential about the investigation. You don't just blab anything to the real world. That goes carefully through your PR department and your legal, any statements that go out about it. And then, if you do prosecute people, you may provide expert testimony explaining what you found, and you provide management with recommendations. That's the job. So your legal counsel may want to make sure that you put a note like this on your communications and include your lawyer on things, because if you do that, then those things are not discoverable in court. Which means that, let me bring back there, just look at this so I can see my echo of the stream that other people are seeing. All right. Anyway, so this is important. Documents and emails with this message in them are not discoverable, so if you get sued by somebody, you do not need to hand them over as evidence. If you don't put this message on things, then those communications are not considered privileged attorney-client communication, and then you have to hand them to the other side, and it might give you more trouble legally. So that's why you see these things all the time. All right, as your internal communications, if you have an intruder on your network, they very likely are monitoring your email, perhaps your internal telephone network and everything else. So if you try to talk to your own team through the usual channels, you might be communicating with the bad guys, letting them know what's happening. So you need to have an alternative way of communicating with them, like encrypted email, and watch your conference calls to make sure that the bad guys aren't joining your conferences. This has happened quite a few times. I know every time I'm in a corporate conference, there are people who dial in, and they always make sure and identify who they are to make sure there's nobody there that is not supposed to be there. That's a good practice. And all right, so that's the point. You can also adjust automated emails from IDS and other systems so they don't disclose sensitive information. So you can get free email certificates from Komodo, and now you can get them free from Let's Encrypt for anybody, so you can have PGP certificates and so on to secure things. But it's pretty inconvenient, and not too many people do it. But what a lot of people do is use Telegram or Signal, something like that, an encrypted app, which is outside your corporate structure. I would recommend using Signal and not Telegram, though, because Telegram is Russian. Some people say it's actually Estonian, and that guy's a rebel. But anyway, there's quite a bit of concern that if you send anything through Telegram, Russia might be able to get it. So if you're an American company, especially if you're associated with critical infrastructure or the military or the American government in any way, I would not use Telegram. But Signal is an American company, well encrypted, and that's a good choice. Anyway, didn't Signal get hacked? Oh, no, what happened is people found that if they put malware on your phone, they can get the data on your phone. And then they said, we hacked Signal, and Signal very vigorously said, no, that doesn't count. I mean, there's nothing nobody can stop that. So Signal defended themselves and said they didn't really get hacked. Other people said, well, I managed to get some of the data on Signal, so there was a big argument about it. But it's not like there was anything wrong with Signal. It's just that, of course, if somebody puts a malicious app on your phone, then they can see some of what happens on your phone. I think that was it.
Is Signal an email?
No, Signal is IM on your phone, instant message. I don't think it has email. At least I've never used it. But I think it has IM, and it probably has, I think it also has voice and maybe even video chat. Yeah. Anyway, so and communicating with your external parties, this is often required. If you're a regulated industry, there'll be disclosure requirements, and I was talking about this, I think, on our last podcast. There's a lot of pressure now to have breach disclosure notifications required in America. They're not much required in America, although now they're required in Europe. And the problem is exactly what counts as a breach has to be defined then. But anyway, there'll be some requirements, some things you must do. For example, if you lose California private information, you have to tell California residents, and I think everybody in the United States might have to do that now. But anyway, this is an issue. You have to consider your external communications about your incident. And like I say, this should be going through your public relations or your legal office. That's who should be controlling this to make sure you carefully say the right thing. Not just somebody technical who will blab something that might be technically true but not the right thing to say. So your IR team has a lot of deliverables. You got status reports, which update your stakeholders, which are the internal people in your company on progress. They will want to know maybe a daily report, how's it going? That's not for public consumption, that's for internal consumption by your management. Then your live response report, these are your triages. We'll be doing these with things with things like Velociraptor, where you get the data from a system. Then forensic examination, if you do that, doing forensic analysis on one machine, and malware analysis. And then the intrusion investigation report will come out. So these are all things, the reports are the main deliverable of the team. And all these are for internal use only. So you can find teams that are trained at well-known places like SANS or Carnegie Mellon. That would be a good idea. And hardware is very helpful. Your IR team, they should have encrypted hard drives, and there are various products that encrypt your hard drive. There used to be TrueCrypt. TrueCrypt was abandoned by the developers. When Microsoft came out with BitLocker, they said TrueCrypt doesn't need to exist anymore because there's an official Microsoft encryption product. But some people thought it should continue, so they made something called VeraCrypt, forked from it, so that's an option. But I think most people use BitLocker or FileVault. Anyway, you can also get hardware-based disk encryption, disks that are encrypted without having a software solution. They have a hardware encryption solution. These are a good idea to make sure that your data is protected, because when you're taking forensic data off your network, it's going to contain information that's not public. And you'll get a powerful laptop computer with a lot of buses and a lot of storage drives. If you're going to be imaging hard drives from machines, you're going to need a lot of storage. And if you have a forensic lab, you'll need one if you're a large enough company. If you're too small of a company, you may have to outsource this to a company like DriveSavers. DriveSavers will do forensics. They will even write up court documents and even send their experts to testify in court for you, and many outsourcers will do that. But anyway, somebody will have to do that if you're going to ever take evidence to court. And so your forensic lab has to have write blockers so they can copy the data off drives without changing it. And they have to have secure storage for this. Typically, it has to be locked in a safe, and somebody has to keep a written record of who locked it up to make sure it's good to take to court. There's a chain of custody for anything that goes to court. You must have a list of people that say, I made sure that this was not being messed with, and then I passed it on to this person, and they made sure of it, and all these people can testify that there's an unbroken chain of custody, or the evidence is not much good in court. And so then you have to have analysis machines. And when you do forensic examination, you always work on a copy of the data. You never work on the original. The original goes in the safe, and that goes to court. Here's the hard drive that contains this evidence. You don't touch it anymore. You just give a copy to the prosecution and a copy to the defense. They both work from copies. And all right, and you got a lot of shared equipment out there, typically disk duplication, write blockers, and mobile device acquisition systems. These things can easily run up to $10,000 or more. I've seen police departments with just tons of them because there are so many portable devices, all the different phones and little digital gadgets, and there can be hundreds of connectors, and they just have like a whole big case, like a suitcase full of all this equipment to image all those different devices. Now, in corporate work, you often don't have to, because all you care about is the corporate devices, and you have standardized, so you know what it is. You just need the connectors for those devices. But police need it all because they're just grabbing stuff from a crime scene, and it could be anything. Anyway, you got to have a place to store all this data, cameras and storage devices and power strips and maintenance tools and all that jazz. Same sort of stuff you'd need for tech support of all those devices. And then you might want, and they say, oh, that's all for the old-fashioned forensics where you're imaging hard drives, which I mentioned we tend to avoid in incident response because that's a whole lot of work and you often don't need it. What you mostly do is monitor the network and do targeted live acquisition. Now let me turn on this light as it gets dark in here. There we go. All right. So monitoring the network is very useful to detect attacks in progress. And so you have some kind of hardware, typically a rack mount system is what you normally have, a powerful device with a lot of processing and a lot of RAM and fast networking. And there are various softwares you can use, Security Onion and other ones. These are the free ones, but the main ones people use are Splunk, and the other one a lot of people use is IBM's QRadar, both of which are very expensive and very good. So there's a popular belief pushed by Encase that you should have to have forensically sound software, and if you use Encase, then every people will trust it in court. This is not really true. The software is not the evidence. The evidence is the human testifying in court. So the forensic examiner has to go through a process of voir dire. You have to justify yourself in court. They will ask you, did you receive formal training? Have you had previous cases like this? How many years have you been doing this? Things like that. You will have to convince them that you are a trustworthy expert, and then it is the human examiner is the real evidence. So there are examiners that do not use any commercial products. They use Linux and open source products and write their own scripts. And as long as you can explain it and convince people in court that you really are competent, that's fine, because you are the evidence. The human testifying is the evidence. But what most people do is they just use standard products like Encase or FTK, and they're actually pretty easy to beat in court, according to one of my teachers, said he always beats them because the typical examiner is a police officer who has been to like a 10-hour vendor training course on how to use this tool, and they know click on this, click on that, and out comes the report, but they don't really understand how it works. And he does all his own stuff with Linux and really understands how it works, and he can usually defeat them in court by knowing the details of the evidence that they don't see. Anyway, so for admissibility of scientific evidence, you have to have a good scientific technique. It has to have been subjected to peer review. You have to know something about the error rate, and there has to be general acceptance. This is why you cannot use astrology or those lie detector machines in court, because they are not accepted as scientific. And then you have various other questions that you will ask to see if this is a sufficient scientific technique, but standard forensic techniques that you learn in this class and in the forensic class are accepted, as long as you are a competent expert and as long as you are presentable in court. You know, your presentation matters. Do you really seem to have it? Do you convince people to trust you, or do you seem to be stumbling and insecure, in which case they won't trust you? So there's a lot of software. There are special forensic Linux distributions to boot to. There's a bunch of them. Here's some of the old ones. There's a lot of new ones. And there's a lot of operating systems out there. There's a lot of disk imaging tools and memory capture tools. So the main thing we would do in IR is live response, which is just running a script to harvest certain information, like a list of files, registry keys, and a script that asks for other things like running processes. And then, as we talked about, and we're going to do it mainly with Velociraptor, you get indicators of compromise, and then you use a tool to look for just these specific items on your fleet of machines. And then there are forensic suites, like I mentioned, Encase, FTK, or Autopsy are the main ones. Autopsy is the free one, Encase and FTK are the expensive, cool ones, and these go into great detail looking at use typically one hard drive. And then, of course, there are log analysis tools like Splunk, which we're going to be using later and you already should be using in the projects. So Velociraptor is my favorite live response tool. It's free and it's very nice. You have a central server and you can just start a hunt and go to all your machines from one point, and it will run a script on all of them to ask certain questions and then harvest the data and bring it back. It's very nice and we'll be using it. Splunk, of course, we're using already for log analysis. This is Google for all your log data, so you can see what's going on all the machines that are connected to Splunk, which should be everything that matters in your company. Everything should be running an agent that forwards its logs to Splunk. All your firewalls, switches, routers, servers, desktops, and everything should just forward all their logs to your Splunk system so you can search from this one point and track down what happened. So, evidence handling, you maintain this stuff with positive control. That's what I was describing. Once you have something that is evidence that's going to go to court, you have to preserve it. So if you have something like a laptop that has evidence, then you have to take that and put it in a safe and have a document that said, I am the person, I got it at this time, I put it in that safe at this time, and it wasn't removed until somebody signed it out, and you have a list of exactly who had it and how they took reasonable precautions to make sure that nobody was modifying it. And you have a hash value if it's digital evidence, so you can verify it hasn't been modified. And you have a chain of custody form just listing who had it, and then who transferred it to this person, and they had it, and they had it. And all these people can go testify in court, if necessary, saying, yes, I really did pick it up on this date, and preserve it in a locked place until that date. This is, of course, why Trump is in a world of trouble now, because he took stuff that was supposed to be kept locked up in a safe place, and he just put it in the drawer at Mar-a-Lago, and you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to carefully maintain security of that stuff. And these are procedures from the Criminal Division Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section has written up recommended procedures, and that's what this is a summary of. All right. And so you'll also have an internal knowledge repository keeping track of your incident cases and how you resolved them and all the steps you did. This is real important because you'll want to review future cases might be related to previous cases, and decisions you make might affect future cases, so you should have an online database or a wiki or something of your incidents and organizing your information of what you did. All right, let's try another Kahoot. 3B is here. I see. Yeah, the home email server. That's right. We're hearing a lot about that again. Hillary Clinton's emails. Yeah. Another issue of handling confidential stuff incorrectly. And one thing I keep hearing from the Republicans is that Obama had a whole bunch of documents. But as far as I know, that is not true. I think they went to the Obama Presidential Library. I think they did not go to his home. But anyway. But Hillary totally did have some confidential stuff on her home server, which was very much like what Trump did. All right. Well, let's give it a try. All right. So which one is network monitoring? Security Onion, it's a free alternative to Splunk. It has a whole conference and a whole vigorous community, and some people love it. When I tried teaching it about 5 or 6 years ago, it was pretty miserable, but I think it has improved. Anyway. All right, which item will protect the data on a stolen laptop? Yeah, the full disk encryption. That's why it's there. This is the number one use case because people constantly lose their laptop. And if it's encrypted, then you don't have to do breach disclosure because it's considered that the bad guy didn't get it. I see some comments here. Hillary stuff leaked because someone fell for a phishing attempt. Well, I didn't know that. There was a phishing email and bad communication. Yeah, well, anyway, all right.
What's FD stand for again?
What's that? Full disk encryption. So, what prevents an email from being discoverable? That's what the privilege label does. What was this? I can't see it. Oh, S-MIME. Oh, S-MIME encrypts emails, technically, so you can't just read them with Wireshark, but they can still be read when they reach their destination and are decrypted. But that has nothing to do with discoverability. Discoverability does not mean detecting it on the wire. It means having to respond when you get a court order. There's a process called discovery when you get sued, where you get a court order saying, okay, you must hand over all documents about this topic. That's what Trump did. They sent him a subpoena saying you must hand over all documents matching this description, and then he didn't do it. But if you have the privileged label, then you do not have to do it because then it's privileged attorney-client communication. Yeah. All right. That was Podesta fell for phishing. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. All right. So which one will collect information about running processes? RAM capture will do that. Live response should be even more efficient, but RAM capture will do it. If you capture all the RAM, then you'll find all the running processes in there. All right. All right, that's Lewis's one twice. As far as I know. Tell me who they are. If they want their points. This semester, I got a lot of people that don't seem to want their points this time. All right, and there was a link in the chat here, which is interesting about John Podesta. Let me throw that up. This is kind of cute. I didn't know this, or I didn't remember this. Back in the days of the Hillary Clinton email scandal, this is the email that hacked the account of John Podesta. He fell for a phishing email, and apparently that was part of all that leaked. I remember Podesta's emails got hacked, and the DNC emails got hacked, and There was a big scandal about it all. So I'll throw this in the chat, or in
He was,
my news
chief of
links.
staff, right?
He was what?
He was the chief of staff or something?
Yeah, he was the DNC head, or he was on Hillary's team or on the DNC team. And it all ended up dumped at WikiLeaks. So they had a pretty serious security incident there. All right, we got another section to go, and it's 10 minutes to 7. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll do the last section here. And then I'll demonstrate some more Splunk. So I'm going to stop this recording.